The $9,200 betrayal. It's just a damn game, Eleanor. Why are you acting like the world is ending? Leo sneered, his eyes glued to his phone as if I weren't even standing there. A game? My voice was a low, dangerous vibration. I held up my phone, the screen glowing with a red notification from my banking app. $9,200, Leo. That's not a game. That's my son's surgery money. That's our survival. Marcus stepped out of the shadows of the hallway, rubbing his face with a tired, dismissive hand. Look, Elle, he's just a kid. He didn't realize the card was linked to your savings. Kids will be kids, okay? Don't make this a federal case. I felt something inside me finally snap. The cold, rainy Seattle air leaking through the window felt warmer than the hearts of the people I had invited into my home. He's 17, Marcus, I said. My teeth clenched so hard my jaw ached. In 6 months, the state calls him an adult. Today I call him a thief. I am Eleanor. I've spent 15 years building a life from nothing after my divorce. I track every cent, every nickel, and every dime. I work as a senior analyst for a tech firm in downtown Seattle, a job that requires me to be cold, logical, and precise. But when it came to family, I had been soft. I had been a fool. 3 months ago, my brother Marcus lost his house in Oregon. I didn't even think twice. I opened my 3-bedroom condo to him, his wife Sarah, and their son Leo. I moved my son Noah into my room. I let them eat my food, use my electricity, and drain my peace of mind. I thought I was being a good sister. I thought I was being family. But as I sat at my kitchen table at 1:00 a.m. on a Tuesday, staring at a string of transactions, luxury sneakers, limited edition gaming consoles, and in-app purchases that cost more than my monthly mortgage, I realized I wasn't a sister. I was an ATM. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a pure, unadulterated rage that felt like liquid fire in my veins. This wasn't just about the money. This was about the fact that they knew. They knew Noah needed that surgery for his respiratory issues. They knew I was driving a car with a transmission that groaned every time I crossed the Evergreen Point floating bridge. And they simply didn't care. Kids will be kids. Marcus's voice echoed in my head. Fine, I whispered to the empty, dark kitchen. If he wants to play like a kid, I'm going to teach him exactly how the adult world handles a brat. I opened my laptop. My fingers flew across the keys with the precision of a surgeon. Step 1. Lock the primary account. Step 2. Dispute every single fraudulent charge. Step 3. Revoke all shared access to the Wi-Fi and streaming services. By 3:00 in the morning, I hadn't just stopped the bleeding. I had cut off the oxygen to their digital lives. Tomorrow morning was going to be a very, very cold day in this house. The silent war and the morning after. The sun didn't rise in Seattle the next morning. It just faded from pitch black to a bruised, heavy gray. I hadn't slept a wink. I sat in the kitchen, a mug of black coffee between my hands, watching the digital clock on the stove. 6:15 a.m. The house was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that precedes a storm. Noah, my son, came out first. He looked pale, his breathing a bit more labored than usual, a constant reminder of why every dollar in that savings account mattered. He saw my face and stopped. Mom, you look like you're ready to go to war, he whispered, sitting across from me. I am Noah, I said, my voice softening only for him. Eat your breakfast. I need you to stay in your room once your Uncle Marcus and Leo wake up. No matter what you hear, don't come out. Okay. He nodded, eyes wide. He knew. He had seen the way Leo looked at his new gadgets, and he had seen the stress lines deepening on my forehead for weeks. At 7 a.m., the peace shattered. "What the hell is wrong with the internet?" Leo's voice boomed from the guest room down the hall. A moment later, he stomped into the kitchen, wearing a pair of $300 designer joggers bought with my money. "Eleanor, the Wi-Fi is down. I'm in the middle of a tournament." I didn't look up from my coffee. "The Wi-Fi isn't down, Leo. Your access has been revoked." "What?" He blinked, looking genuinely confused, as if the concept of consequences was a foreign language. Marcus and Sarah followed him in, lured by the sound of conflict. Marcus was still in his robe, looking disheveled and annoyed. "Elle, come on. I told you we'd talk about this. The kid needs the internet for his schoolwork, too." Schoolwork. I finally looked up, my gaze locking onto Marcus's like a laser. "Is that what you call the $4,000 he spent on Ultimate Team Packs and Dragon Gold? Is that the curriculum at his high school now? Because last I checked, fraud isn't a graduation requirement." Sarah crossed her arms, her face hardening into that defensive, pinched look she always got when she was about to be unreasonable. "Eleanor, you're being incredibly dramatic. We're family. You make 6 figures. What is a few $1,000s to you compared to your nephew's happiness? You're acting like he robbed a bank." "He did rob a bank, Sarah," I snapped. "The Bank of Eleanor. And the interest rate just went up to 100%. "Look," Marcus intervened, stepping between us. "I'll pay you back. Once I land that foreman job at the construction site next month, I'll give you every cent. Just turn the internet back on and let us have a peaceful morning." I stood up slowly. I'm 5'8", but in that moment, I felt 10 feet tall. "With what money, Marcus? You haven't paid me a dime for rent, utilities, or the groceries you've been inhaling for 3 months. You didn't even pay for the gas to get here from Oregon. I Venmo'd you that money." "You're being cold, Elle," Marcus said, his voice dropping into that manipulative, disappointed big brother tone. "Our parents would be ashamed to see you treating us like this. We're your only family." "Don't you dare bring Mom and Dad into this," I hissed. "Dad taught us to work for what we have. Mom taught us never to take what isn't ours. You failed both of them. And as for Leo..." I turned my eyes to my nephew, who was leaning against the counter, looking bored. "I hope you enjoyed those sneakers, Leo. Truly. Because the courier is coming to pick them up in an hour." Leo's face dropped. "What? No. They're mine. I've already worn them." I filed a claim for unauthorized transactions. I said, my voice as cold as the rain hitting the window. "The bank is reversing the charges. The retailers are sending return labels. And since you used my account, I have every legal right to return the merchandise. If you don't hand them over, I'll have a police officer stand here while you take them off." "You wouldn't," Sarah gasped. "You'd call the cops on your own blood." "I'd call the National Guard if it meant getting my son's surgery money back," I replied. "You have 30 minutes to put every single item Leo bought in a box by the front door. If one thing is missing, I'm calling the Seattle PD to report a grand larceny. And Marcus, don't test me. I've already called a locksmith. He'll be here at noon." "A locksmith?" Marcus's face went white. "What for?" I picked up my mug and took a slow, deliberate sip. "To change the locks. You have until noon to pack your things. You aren't family anymore, Marcus. You're just a group of people who broke into my life and tried to steal my son's future. Get out." The silence that followed was absolute. For the first time in months, I was the one in control. But as I looked at their stunned, angry faces, I knew this was only the beginning. They weren't going to go quietly. The siege of the living room. The atmosphere in the condo shifted from stunned silence to a frantic, ugly chaos. Marcus didn't start packing. Instead, he did what he always did when backed into a corner. He tried to bulldoze me. "You're bluffing," Marcus barked, slamming his fist onto the marble island I had worked 3 years to pay off. "You can't just throw us out on the street in the middle of a Seattle winter. There are laws, Eleanor tenant rights. You have to give us 30 days' notice." I leaned back against the counter, crossing my arms. I had anticipated this move. Marcus was a professional at using the system to his advantage. But he had forgotten one thing: I was the one who read the fine print for a living. "Tenant rights, Marcus." I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "To be a tenant, you have to have a lease. To have a lease, you have to pay rent. You haven't paid a single dollar. In the eyes of Washington State, you are social guests. And when a host asks a guest to leave and they refuse, it's no longer a civil matter. It's trespassing." "We've been here 3 months!" Sarah shrieked, her face turning a blotchy, frantic red. "That makes us residents. You can't just toss Leo's things into the rain. He's a minor." "He's 17. I corrected her, my voice dropping an octave. "And if you want to play the legal game, let's talk about the $9,200 theft. If I file that police report, Leo doesn't go to his room. He goes to a juvenile detention center. Is that the residency you had in mind for him?" The mention of the police report acted like a bucket of ice water. Leo, who had been trying to look tough, suddenly looked very small. He looked at his father, his lower lip trembling. The bravado was evaporated, replaced by the realization that his cool life on my dime was collapsing. "Marcus, do something," Sarah hissed, grabbing her husband's arm. Marcus looked at me, his eyes searching for the soft sister he had manipulated for years. He found nothing but a stone wall. "Elle, please, be reasonable. We have nowhere to go. My bank account is overdrawn. Sarah's car is making that clicking sound again. You're really going to let your own nephew sleep in a car?" "Maybe if he hadn't spent $9,000 on digital skins and designer hoodies, you'd have enough for a motel," I said. "Every choice has a price, Marcus. You chose to ignore his behavior. You chose to lie to me. Now you're paying the bill." I walked over to the front door and opened it. The damp, chilly air rushed in, smelling of pine and wet asphalt. I pointed to the hallway. 30 minutes for the boxes, 2 hours to be gone. The locksmith is already on his way from Bellevue." "I'm not moving a muscle," Marcus said, sitting down defiantly on my velvet sofa. "Call the cops. See if I care. By the time they get here, I'll tell them you've been harassing us." I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I simply pulled my phone out and dialed a number on speaker. "Seattle Police Department non-emergency line. How can I help you?" The voice crackled through the speaker. Marcus jumped up as if the sofa had turned into hot coals. "Wait, hang up, Eleanor. Hang up right now." I kept my finger over the end call button, but didn't press it yet. I looked at him, my expression vacant. "The clock is ticking, Marcus. Are we packing, or are we talking to Officer Miller?" "Pack the bags." Marcus spat at Sarah, his voice cracking with humiliation. "Pack the bags now." For the next hour, the house was filled with the sound of drawers slamming and Sarah's muffled sobbing. They stuffed clothes into garbage bags, a fitting container for the mess they had made. Leo was forced to hand over the boxes of electronics and the sneakers. I checked every single one against my bank statement. "Missing a headset," I said, checking off an item, "and a pair of wireless earbuds." "I lost them," Leo yelled from the bedroom. "Then I'm keeping your PlayStation 5, I shouted back. "Consider it a partial refund." "That's mine. My dad bought that for my birthday." "With what money, Leo?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Marcus had likely used the emergency money I gave him for gas and groceries to buy the kids' affection. As they dragged their bags toward the door, the locksmith arrived. The sound of the drill echoing through the hallway was the most beautiful music I had heard in months. It was the sound of my home becoming a sanctuary again. Marcus stood at the threshold, 2 heavy bags in his hands. He looked at me with a hatred so pure it should have burned. "You're dead to me, Eleanor. Don't you ever call us. When Noah's surgery comes around and you're all alone in this big empty house, remember this. You chose money over blood." "No, Marcus," I said, looking him straight in the eye as I prepared to shut the door. "I chose my son over a thief. There's a difference." I slammed the door and turned the new deadbolt. Click. I leaned my back against the wood, my heart hammering against my ribs. I thought I would feel guilty. I thought I would cry. But as I looked at the quiet, empty hallway, all I felt was a massive, overwhelming sense of relief. But then my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I swiped it open. "You think it's that easy to get rid of us? We know where you work, Elle. We know where Noah goes to school. This isn't over." My blood ran cold. The war wasn't over. It had just moved outside. The shadow at the gates. The text message sat on my screen like a venomous insect. "This isn't over." I stared at it until the screen went black, reflecting my own pale, haunted face. I had expected anger, even a few choice insults shouted through the door. But a direct threat against my son's school and my workplace. That changed the rules of engagement. Marcus wasn't just a parasite anymore. He was a predator. "Mom, are they gone?" Noah stood at the end of the hallway, clutching his inhaler. The house was unnervingly quiet now that the constant thumping of Leo's bass music and Sarah's shrill complaints had ceased. "They're gone, honey," I said, forcing my voice to drop into a calm, steady rhythm. I slipped the phone into my pocket. He didn't need to see the threat. "The house is ours again. Why don't you go finish your homework? I'm going to make some actual dinner. Not takeout, not frozen pizza. Real food." "Can we have the lemon herb chicken?" he asked, a small spark of hope in his eyes. "Anything you want," I promised. As soon as he retreated, I didn't go to the kitchen. I went to the window. Down in the parking lot, Marcus's battered SUV was idling. I could see the silhouettes of 3 people inside. They didn't drive away. They just sat there, the exhaust pluming in the cold Seattle air, staring up at my 3rd-floor balcony. My pulse quickened. My mind, trained for risk assessment, began running through scenarios. Marcus didn't have money for a hotel. He didn't have friends in the city. He was desperate, and desperate people are unpredictable. I picked up the phone and called my HR director, Brenda. "Eleanor, it's 6:00 p.m. Everything okay?" Brenda's voice was warm but professional. "Brenda, I'm calling to report a potential security issue," I said, walking away from the window so Noah wouldn't hear. "I've had a domestic falling out with my brother. He's made some veiled threats regarding the office. I want to make sure security has his photo and his vehicle description. He is not to be admitted under any circumstances." "I'm so sorry, Eleanor. We'll handle it immediately. I'll alert the front desk and the garage attendants. Do you feel safe at home?" "I've changed the locks," I said. "But I don't feel safe," I thought. After hanging up, I spent the next hour in a state of hypervigilance. I checked the balcony door 3 times. I checked the secondary lock on the windows. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump. When I finally started cooking, the sound of the knife hitting the cutting board felt like a countdown. The lemon chicken was searing in the pan when my phone rang again. Not a text this time. A call. From Sarah. I hesitated, then answered. "What do you want, Sarah? How could you do this?" She sobbed, but it was a calculated theatrical sob. I could hear the wind whistling in the background. They were still in the car. Leo is crying, Eleanor. He's a child. He's cold, and we have nowhere to go. We're sitting in a parking lot like homeless people. Is this what you wanted, to humiliate us? What I wanted was for Leo not to steal $9.200, I replied coldly. What I wanted was for my brother to be a man and take responsibility. You aren't sitting like homeless people because of me. You're there because you spent your last dime on a lifestyle you couldn't afford with money that wasn't yours. You have a guest room. It's empty, she shrieked, the tears disappearing instantly. You're a selfish, cold-hearted bee. I'm a mother, Sarah, I interrupted. And my first priority is the boy in the other room whose future you almost liquidated. If I see that SUV in my parking lot in 10 minutes, I'm not calling the non-emergency line. I'm calling 911 to report a stalker. Choose your next move very carefully. I hung up before she could respond. I walked back to the window. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, the taillights of the SUV flickered on. The car swung out of the parking space with a violent screech of tires and sped toward the exit. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. But the relief was hollow. I knew Marcus. He was a lingerer. He was the kind of man who would wait for you to fall asleep before he tried the doorknob. Dinner's ready? I called out, my voice cracking slightly. Noah came out looking a bit better, but he was staring at his own phone. Mom, look at this. He handed me the device. It was an Instagram post from Leo. It was a photo of me taken from the hallway earlier that day, distorted with a filter to make me look monstrous. The caption read, "The rich aunt who kicks her family out in the rain because of a glitch in her bank account." Watch your back, Eleanor. Karma is a bitch. The comments were already piling up from their relatives back in Oregon. Unbelievable money changes people. Poor Leo. Stay strong. They were turning the entire family against me. They were painting me as the villain of a story they had written with my blood and sweat. I handed the phone back to Noah. My hands were perfectly still now. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, sharpened clarity. They wanted a villain. They wanted to see what happens when Eleanor stops being the helpful sister and starts being the senior analyst. Noah, I said, my voice calm and terrifyingly quiet. Don't look at social media tonight. In fact, let's just turn off the phones. Are you okay, Mom? I looked at the boxes of returned items sitting by the door, the only physical evidence of the theft. I'm fine, Noah. I'm just realizing that when you prune a dead branch off a tree, the tree doesn't die. It grows faster. But inside, I was already planning. If they were going to use the family name to drag me through the mud, I was going to use the legal system to bury them. The first thing I did after dinner wasn't the dishes. I sat down and started drafting a formal cease and desist order. And then I began the process of filing a small claim suit for the full $9,200 plus damages. They thought the war was over because they left the house. They didn't realize I was just getting started. The poisoned well. The next morning, the silence of the apartment felt heavy like the air before a lightning strike. I woke up at 4:30 a.m., not because of an alarm, but because my brain was already calculating the next moves. I scrolled through my emails and found exactly what I expected: a barrage of messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. How could you, Eleanor? Your own brother. We always thought you were the successful one, but success clearly ate your soul. Give the boy his things back. He's just a child. I deleted them one by one without replying. I didn't owe an explanation to people who only cared about family when it was convenient for their conscience. By 8:30 a.m., I was at my desk in downtown Seattle. The skyscraper overlooked the gray expanse of Elliott Bay. Usually the view calmed me, But today, every time the elevator chimed, my neck muscles tightened. Eleanor, a word. It was Brenda, the HR director. She looked concerned. She walked into my office and closed the door, a gesture that never preceded good news. Did Marcus show up? I asked, my pen poised over a report. Not exactly, Brenda said, sighing as she sat across from me. But he's been busy. He's been calling the front desk every 20 minutes claiming you've stolen his legal documents and that you're keeping his son's medical records hostage. He's also started tagging the company's official LinkedIn page in posts about unethical leadership and financial elder abuse, even though neither of you are elderly. I closed my eyes for a second, feeling a headache bloom behind my temples. He's trying to get me fired, Brenda. He knows if I lose my job, I lose my leverage. We know you, Eleanor. Your performance is impeccable. But the board hates negative social media attention. We've had to assign a PR junior just to scrub the comments on our latest project announcement because your brother's friends are spamming it. Brenda leaned forward. You need to handle this, privately, quickly, before the chief operating officer decides the drama isn't worth the talent. I understand, I said, my voice tight. I'll take care of it. As soon as she left, I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I went to work. I pulled up the records. I had meticulously gathered the bank statements showing the IP addresses of the purchases which matched the Wi-Fi in my own home, the security footage from my hallway showing Leo carrying packages he thought I hadn't seen, and the text messages from Marcus admitting the kid did it. But then my phone rang. It was an unrecognized number. Eleanor, it's Detective Vance, Seattle PD. My heart skipped. Yes, Detective. We received a report this morning from a Marcus Miller. He's claiming you've illegally evicted him and are in possession of several $1,000s worth of his personal property, specifically electronics and high-end apparel. He's filed a complaint for theft. I almost laughed. The sheer audacity of it. He was trying to flip the script. He was trying to turn my recovery of my own stolen funds into me stealing from him. Detective, I said, my voice as sharp as a razor. I'm glad you called. I was actually about to head down to the station to file a report for grand larceny, identity theft, and credit card fraud. I have the evidence ready to be hand-delivered. Would you like to see the receipts for the property he claims I stole, because they were all purchased using my credit card without my authorization? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I see. It sounds like there are two very different versions of this story. There is the truth, Detective, and then there is my brother's imagination. I'll be there in 30 minutes. I stood up, grabbed my blazer, and headed for the door. But as I reached the elevator, my phone buzzed with a notification from my home security app. Movement detected, front door. I froze. I pulled up the live feed. There, standing in the hallway of my apartment building, were Marcus and Sarah. Marcus was holding a crowbar. Sarah was looking over her shoulder, acting as a lookout. You idiot, I whispered to the screen. You absolute idiot. They didn't know I had upgraded the camera to a hidden model inside the smoke detector after they moved in. They were trying to break in. They thought I was at work, and they thought they could take back the merchandise I had confiscated. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I pressed the microphone button on the app. Marcus! My voice boomed through the tiny speaker on the camera at my front door. He jumped, nearly dropping the crowbar. He looked around wildly, eyes landing on the hidden lens. I'm recording this in 4K, Marcus, I said, my voice cold and echoing in the hallway. The police are already on the line. If that crowbar touches my door, you aren't just going to lose a civil suit. You're going to prison for attempted burglary. Look at the camera, Sarah. Smile for the jury. Sarah grabbed Marcus's arm, her face contorted in terror. Marcus, let's go. She's crazy. She's going to ruin us. She already did. Marcus roared at the camera, his face turning a dark, sickly purple. You think you're so smart, Elle? You think you've won? I'll burn this whole thing down before I let you keep that money. He swung the crowbar not at the door, but at the camera. The screen went black with a burst of static. I stood in the office hallway staring at the dead screen. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was the adrenaline of a hunter who finally had their prey in the sights. He had just moved from annoying family member to felon in under 60 seconds. I didn't go to the police station. I called my lawyer. "Jim, it's Eleanor. Change of plans. I don't just want the money back anymore. I want a restraining order, and I want to press full criminal charges for the break-in. No more family discounts. I want him in a cell." As I walked toward the parking garage, I felt a strange sense of mourning. Not for Marcus, he had died to me the moment he stole from Noah, but for the person I used to be. The person who believed that blood was thicker than water. It turns out water is much easier to clean up. Blood just leaves a stain. The schoolyard standoff revised. The drive from the police precinct to Noah's school was a blur of adrenaline and white-knuckled terror. Only minutes ago, I had been sitting across from Detective Vance presenting evidence of the $9,200 theft and the chilling footage of Marcus wielding a crowbar at my front door. I thought I was winning the legal battle, but the moment my phone rang and the principal's voice trembled on the other end, I realized Marcus had moved the battlefield to the one place I couldn't protect with a deadbolt my son. "Ms. Miller, a woman named Sarah is here claiming there's a family emergency. Noah is refusing to go, but she's being very insistent," the principal had said. I didn't just drive. I flew. I wove through the sluggish Seattle traffic, my SUV roaring as I bypassed red lights and ignored the indignant honks of other drivers. My mind was a storm of dark scenarios. Marcus and Sarah were desperate. They were broke homeless and facing felony charges. To them, Noah wasn't a nephew or a child. He was a bargaining chip. When I screeched into the school's circular driveway, the scene was worse than I imagined. Sarah was clutching the strap of Noah's backpack, her face twisted into a mask of faux concern that looked more like a snarl. Noah was anchored to the pavement, his face deathly pale, his small frame shaking as he clutched his inhaler. Marcus was hovering by their battered SUV, his eyes darting around like a trapped animal. I didn't even wait for the car to fully stop. I threw it into park and leaped out, my boots hitting the wet asphalt with a heavy thud. "Get your hands off my son!" I roared. The sheer force of my voice seemed to vibrate through the rainy air. Sarah flinched, dropping the backpack strap. She immediately shifted her posture, trying to look like the victim for the benefit of the other parents watching from their cars. "Eleanor, oh, thank God, we were just trying to help. Noah looked so sick, and we knew you were trapped at that high-pressure job of yours." "Liar!" Noah's voice broke through the air, high and sharp. He ran to me, diving behind my coat, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "I didn't call them, Mom. They just showed up and tried to pull me into the car." I wrapped an arm around Noah, feeling the frantic beat of his heart against my side. I looked at Marcus. He looked pathetic, unshaven, wearing a jacket I had bought him standing next to a car filled with garbage bags of stolen belongings. "Back off, Marcus," I said, my voice dropping to a low, lethal simmer. "I just left the North Precinct. There is a warrant out for your arrest for attempted burglary. If you don't get in that car and drive away right now, I'm not calling a detective. I'm going to scream, 'Kidnapper,' until every father in this pickup line tackles you into the mud." Marcus took a step forward, his fists clenched. "You think you're so tough behind your bank account, Elle? This is my family, too. You're destroying us over a few $1,000. You destroyed yourselves the second you touched my son's medical fund." I countered, stepping toward him, shielding Noah with my entire body. "And you ended any claim to family the moment you tried to snatch him from school. Look around, Marcus. The security guard is already on the radio. The clock is at 0. Marcus looked at the school entrance where a uniformed guard was indeed speaking into a shoulder mic. He saw the surrounding parents filming with their phones. He realized he had lost the narrative. "Fine," he spat, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Keep your money, but don't you dare cry when you realize you've got no one left." They peeled out of the driveway, their tires spitting gravel. I collapsed onto my knees and pulled Noah into a crushing hug. I had saved him, but the war had just entered its most dangerous phase. The atmosphere inside our hotel room was heavy, a stark contrast to the sterile lavender-scented air. Noah was finally asleep, his chest rising and falling in a rhythmic pattern aided by his humidifier. I sat by the window, the glow of my laptop screen the only light in the room, watching the digital clock crawl forward. Marcus's 60-minute ultimatum had long since expired. I wasn't just waiting for the police anymore. I was dissecting the remains of my brother's life. Earlier that evening, I had made a decision. If Marcus wanted to play a game of shadows, I would illuminate every dark corner he owned. I logged into our family's old shared cloud storage, a digital relic Marcus had forgotten he even had access to. Within 30 minutes, I found what I was looking for, a folder buried deep in the archives labeled Legal Documents. My blood turned to ice as I scrolled through the PDFs. It wasn't just bad luck that had brought Marcus to Seattle. He had been sued in Oregon for embezzling nearly $50,000 from a construction project he was supervising. He had avoided a prison sentence only by agreeing to a massive repayment plan, a plan he had clearly abandoned months ago. He hadn't just moved to Seattle for a fresh start. He was a fugitive from his own debts. So that's what the $9,200 was for, I whispered to the empty room. It wasn't for Leo's video games or Sarah's vanity. It was a desperate attempt to pay off his Oregon lawyers before his probation was revoked. He had used my son's surgery money to buy his own freedom. My phone buzzed, vibrating against the glass tabletop. It was a restricted number. I knew it was him. "Eleanor!" Marcus's voice crackled through the speaker. He sounded frayed, the calm facade of the wronged brother completely gone. "We're at a gas station. We have $20 left. Leo is terrified. I'm giving you one last chance. Drop the police report. Send $5,000, just $5 to a Venmo account. I'll text you and we'll disappear. You'll never have to look at us again." "You're extorting me now, Marcus?" I asked, my voice terrifyingly steady. I hit the record button on my laptop. "After you tried to snatch Noah, after you came to my door with a crowbar. I was trying to get what's ours," he roared. "You have everything. The career, the condo, the perfect kid. And what do I have? Nothing. You owe me, Eleanor. I protected you when we were kids. I took the hits from Dad so you wouldn't have to. I paid you back 1,000 times over," I snapped. "I paid for your wedding. I paid for Leo's birth. I am done paying for your failures. And I know about Oregon, Marcus. I found the embezzlement files. I know you're on probation." The silence on the other end was sudden and absolute. "Here is how this ends," I continued, my voice like a sharpened blade. "You drive to the North Precinct right now and turn yourself in for the attempted break-in. If you do that, I will tell the DA I'm willing to discuss a plea deal for the credit card fraud. If you don't, I am emailing every file I found to the Oregon State Police in 59 minutes. "Eleanor, please. 58 minutes, Marcus," I said, and I hung up. I stood up and looked at Noah. I felt a strange, hollow coldness in my chest. I had just dismantled my only brother's life. But as I watched my son breathe, I realized that I wasn't the one who had started the fire. I was just the one who refused to let it burn my house down. I wasn't just a sister anymore. I was a mother, protecting her cub, and in this world, that was the only thing that mattered. The Cornered Rat. Revised. The hotel room felt like a high-security bunker. Outside, the Seattle rain turned the city lights into blurred smears of neon. Inside, I was a woman transformed by betrayal. I sat by the window, the blue light of my laptop reflecting in my eyes, while Noah slept fitfully. Marcus's deadline had passed hours ago, and the silence from the police was beginning to gnaw at my nerves. At 11:45 p.m., Detective Vance finally called. "He didn't turn himself in, Eleanor," he said, his voice heavy with fatigue. "We found the SUV ditched at a rest stop near Shoreline. He's on the move, and he's not alone. Sarah and the boy are with him, but he's doing something else. He's reaching out to local news tip lines. He's trying to sell a story about a cold-hearted executive who is rendering a family homeless. He's trying to destroy your reputation to get a payout." I felt a surge of nausea. Marcus wasn't just a thief. He was a parasite willing to kill the host. My phone buzzed again shortly after Vance hung up. It was a photo from an unknown number. My blood turned to ice as I saw the image. It was a picture of my current hotel, taken from the dark parking lot below. "Room 412, right Nice View L." The text read, "Too bad you won't be enjoying it for long. If you don't transfer $10,000 to my crypto wallet in the next hour, I'm sending the embezzlement files, the ones you helped me hide, to your CEO." The lie was breathtaking. I had never helped him hide anything. He was fabricating evidence to drag me down into the dirt with him. I looked at Noah, then at the door. They were downstairs. They were here. Instead of panicking, I went into analyst mode. I pulled out Leo's old tablet, the one I had confiscated and bypassed earlier. I dug into the hidden chat logs. What I found was a chilling confirmation Marcus had been coaching Leo for months. "Just make it look like she signed the authorizations," one message read. "She's soft. She'll cry, but she won't call the cops." They had never loved me. I was just a long-term mark. I ainced my ribs and grabbed a heavy glass lamp. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. It wasn't Marcus. It was Sarah. She looked like a ghost, haggard, soaked to the bone, her eyes hollowed out by terror. I cracked the door open, keeping the chain engaged. "What are you doing here, Sarah?" She shoved a manila envelope through the gap, her voice a desperate whisper. "He's lost it, Eleanor. Marcus is talking about burning your condo down just so you feel the heat. He's got gasoline in the trunk. He's arguing with Leo in the alleyway right now." I took the envelope. Inside were the forged documents Marcus intended to use to ruin my career. Sarah was weeping now. "I'm a mother too, Elle. I realized tonight, if he's willing to burn you alive, he'll do it to us eventually. Please, stop him." Blue and red lights began to dance against the brick walls of the alleyway outside. The sirens were screaming, closing in from all directions. I looked at the woman who had helped rob me then, out at the storm. "Too late, Sarah," I said, my voice as cold as the Seattle rain. "The storm is already here." The war that started with a credit card was about to end in handcuffs and gasoline. I closed the door and locked it finally, ready to let the law finish what my family had started. The screams from the alleyway echoed up the hotel's concrete walls, cutting through the rhythmic pulse of the sirens. I stood by the window of room 412, my hand trembling as I pulled back the curtain. Below, the scene looked like a chaotic stage play under the harsh, flickering glare of police cruisers. Marcus was being pinned against the wet pavement by 2 officers, his face pressed into the asphalt. Leo stood a few feet away, his hands over his head, sobbing as a 3rd officer moved in to handcuff him. The gasoline can Sarah had mentioned sat upright on the sidewalk, a bright red plastic omen of the tragedy that had almost unfolded. Marcus wasn't just fighting the officers, he was howling. Even from the 4th floor, I could hear the primal, ugly sound of his rage. He wasn't yelling about the money anymore. He was screaming my name, a curse hurled into the night sky. I turned away from the window, unable to watch any longer. Sarah was still slumped against the hallway door on the other side, her silent tears leaving streaks on the carpet. I unlatched the chain and let her in. We sat in the dim light of the hotel room, 2 mothers broken by the same man, while my son Noah slept through the end of his family as he knew it. "He was going to do it, Eleanor." Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the air conditioner. "He had the lighter in his hand. He told Leo that if you didn't pay, the only thing left to do was to make sure you had nothing left to go home to. He didn't care that Noah's things were in there. He didn't care about anything but hurting you. I looked at the manila envelope she had given me, the forged documents meant to ruin my life. I realized then that my brother hadn't just stolen $9,200. He had tried to steal my identity, my safety, and my future. He had groomed his own son to be a thief because it was easier than being a father. An hour later, a soft knock came at the door. It was Detective Vance. He looked older, the shadows under his eyes deeper in the hotel's fluorescent hallway light. "It's over, Eleanor," he said, removing his damp hat. "We've got them both. Marcus is being charged with attempted arson, felony stalking, and witness intimidation on top of the initial fraud charges. Given his record in Oregon, he won't be seeing the outside of a cell for a long time." "And Leo?" I asked, my voice cracking. Vance sighed. "He's a juvenile, and Sarah's cooperation will help him. But he's going into the system. There are consequences for what he did, Eleanor. Even if his father pushed him into it, he took the steps." I felt a pang of grief for the little boy. Leo used to be the one I used to buy Christmas presents for. But that boy was gone, replaced by the shadow of the man currently being loaded into a transport van. "I need to go down to the station and sign the final statements, don't I?" I asked. "Tomorrow morning is fine," Vance said gently. "Get some sleep. You've earned it." I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed. I looked at the bank app on my phone. The $9,200 had been officially credited back to my account after the bank reviewed the police reports and the chat logs I provided. The money was there. Noah's surgery was safe. My career, thanks to the evidence Sarah provided, was no longer in jeopardy. I had won, but as I sat in the dark listening to the rain tap against the glass, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a survival. I had pruned the dead branches of my family tree, and though the tree was scarred and bleeding, I knew that come spring, it would finally be able to grow again. The horizon of healing. Revised. 2 weeks had passed since the night the sirens screamed in the hotel alleyway. Seattle was finally shaking off its mantle of gray clouds, allowing a rare golden winter sun to glint off the surface of Elliott Bay. I stood in the hallway of my condo, the smell of fresh white paint still lingering in the air. The door had been replaced solid oak this time, and the security system was the best money could buy. But the real change wasn't in the hardware. It was in the silence. It was no longer a heavy, suffocating silence, but a clean, peaceful one. I walked into Noah's room. He was sitting up in bed, surrounded by pillows, his breathing deep and clear. The surgery had been a success. The $9,200 that Marcus and Leo had tried to vanish into digital thin air had instead paid for the specialists who had repaired my son's lungs. Seeing him inhale without that terrifying wheeze was a wealth that no bank account could ever quantify. "Mom, can we go to the park later?" Noah asked, his voice stronger than I had heard it in years. "The doctor said you need one more day of rest, honey," I said, kissing his forehead. "But tomorrow we can go anywhere you want." I walked back into the kitchen and sat down with a cup of coffee. My laptop was open, but for the first time in a decade, I wasn't looking at spreadsheets. I was looking at a letter from the district attorney. Marcus had pleaded guilty to a litany of charges to avoid a longer trial. Between the arson attempt in Seattle and the embezzlement in Oregon, he was looking at 15 years. Sarah had taken Leo back to her mother's house in a small town outside of Spokane. Leo was on strict probation and undergoing mandatory counseling. Sarah and I didn't speak, but she had sent one final text. "Thank you for being the person I wasn't strong enough to be. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a woman who had finally learned the difference between loyalty and enabling." For years, I had confused family with sacrifice, believing that my success belonged to anyone with my last name. I had let Marcus bleed me dry because I was afraid of being the cold sister. But the coldness hadn't come from me. It had come from him. My fire was for protection, not for destruction. The doorbell rang. I checked the camera feed, a habit that no longer felt like a panic response, but simple diligence. It was Brenda from HR carrying a basket of fruit and a stack of get-well cards from the office. The CEO wanted me to personally tell you that the board has officially dismissed all those anonymous claims, Brenda said as I let her in. In fact, they're so impressed with how you handled the crisis that there's a promotion waiting for you when you return. Senior Vice President of Risk Management. Quite fitting, don't you think? I smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. I think I've had enough risk management for one lifetime, Brenda. But I'll take it. After she left, I stood on my balcony looking out at the city. The trauma of the betrayal was still there, a scar that would likely never fade, but it was no longer an open wound. I had protected my home. I had saved my son. I had reclaimed my life from the people who thought my kindness was a weakness. I pulled my phone out and did something I should have done months ago. I went to my contacts, found the group titled Family, and hit delete. As the screen cleared, I realized that family isn't defined by the blood in your veins, but by the people who stand by you when the storm hits. I looked back inside at Noah, who was laughing at a cartoon on his tablet. My family was small, but it was solid. It was safe, and for the first time in my life, it was enough. The storm had passed. The air was clear. And finally, I could breathe. Look, family is important, but they don't get a free pass to ruin your life. Helping someone out is great, but don't let them mistake your kindness for weakness. You've worked hard for what you have. Don't feel guilty for protecting it. Sometimes saying no and setting a boundary is the only way to keep your sanity and your home safe. Take care of yourself first. Thanks for hanging out and listening to this story today. I really hope it gave you something to think about. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how Eleanor handled everything. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. See you in the next one.